So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted that you could join us here today for our CFO panel discussion on how organisations can evolve in the face of uncertainty. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Brian Murphy. I'm an audit and assurance partner in Deloitte. I'm also the lead of our Best Managed Companies programme. I'm delighted and very excited today that I'm being joined by three of Ireland's leading CFOs. I've Carol Phelan here from Dalata Hotel, Bill O'Sullivan from Boyne Valley, and also David Manifold from eShopWorld. As you've probably noticed, we've already embraced technology in that David is joining us here in studio online, virtually actually from New York. So David, I hope you've had some coffee. I think we're a few hours in terms of time differences. As I've mentioned, in today's discussion, it's about organisations particularly focusing in on the finance pillar and how this can evolve and drive growth in the face of uncertainty. Since 2015, our biannual CFO survey has been collecting insights from the finance leaders across Europe to share the views on a range of relevant topics and roles, including the economy, business strategy, and technology adoption. Our most recent research was released in late June, with data revealing that despite signs of cautious optimism for the months ahead, organisations could benefit from growth opportunities, especially by investing in long-term strategies such as talent and technology, which we'll be discussing later today. Unsurprisingly, early data from our autumn edition of the survey, which was released or will be released in the coming weeks, reveals a 23% decrease in financial optimism over the past 6 months. And we're going to touch on that a little as well as we go through the session today. Given the breadth of external challenges facing CFOs over this period, this drop in CFO sentiment doesn't come really as a surprise to any of us. However, there are still opportunities in the market to drive progress, and hopefully we'll touch on some of those as we discuss through the panel here today. Given the recency also of the budget in 2023 and the need for a collective ambition to invest in our business and the economy, I think this will really be a timely discussion and hopefully an insightful discussion also. I know I'm certainly looking forward to hearing what our panel has to share with us, and hopefully we're going to get some kind of insights and hopefully some strategies that you'll be able to take away from today's session. Without further ado, we'll kick off today's session. Today I will be co-moderating our discussion alongside my colleague Fiona McLafferty, who's recently joined our tax department as a managing director in our tax, controversy and revenue audit section. Before Fiona joins us, I'll open our discussion with a general session on business confidence for the year ahead, after which Fiona then will join us for a discussion on Budget 2023 and how organisations can drive profit in this changing environment. After that, I'll rejoin to close out on a much anticipated and hopefully very fruitful and very engaging and hopefully positive discussion around investing in talent and technology before we close out then with the Q&A. As always, you can input your questions for our panellists into the Q&A box in any stage during the session. We'll aim to get through these questions, and if we don't, we'll do our best to kind of come back to you with some answers. You can tweet or you can follow us on our Twitter channel, so feel free to join the discussion using hashtag #DeloitteCFO. So welcome, Carol, Bill, and of course David. We'll try and not forget you there online. Thank you for all joining us today. We're going to kick off then our first session on business sentiments. So thanks, guys. So I suppose if I kind of just kick off with maybe some facts from our survey. So the recent CFO survey had that 63% of Irish CFOs believed that their firms were facing a high level of financial and economic uncertainty. And interestingly, it's the same actually for the most recent kind of publication coming from our autumn sessions. Highly, I suppose, are probably not surprising in fairness, based on everything that is happening in the current environment. So Carol, I might just come to you first. Would you just talk us through really, I suppose, the impact inflation, rising energy costs have had obviously on the Dalata Group, been very much forefront in the hospitality sector, and kind of if you can share with us some of the strategies that you, along with the board and senior management, are kind of using to address these.
Yep, I suppose firstly from a glass half full perspective, as a hospitality business, we're back open, we're trading, global travel is back moving, corporates are starting to travel again. So from our perspective, while there is quite a bit of uncertainty ahead of us as a business, I suppose we're very optimistic now that we're able to be back and running our business as we would have before. Yes, there are challenges in the environment, notably energy costs, and it is very difficult as a business. We're lucky it's not one of our biggest costs, but it is not inconsiderable, and particularly not at the levels of inflation we've seen on it recently. So all we can do, I suppose, is some of the things we had been doing prior to some of this, which was actually our focus on sustainability to try and drive down our consumption for that broader climate change agenda and issues that are coming up on the horizon. And that's been very successful, actually. And part of that has been mobilising it across the whole group. So bringing it to every person who's within the organisation to understand why we're doing it, why we're trying to reduce consumption, well before, I suppose, looking at some of these costs. It is a challenging environment because you're looking to try and remove some of the uncertainty. So naturally, you maybe look to buy forward or to hedge. But with the government looking at lots of different initiatives, that also brings its own challenge and uncertainty. So you just really, as a business, have to try and look out the medium term, continue to do what you're doing. And the reality is, like a lot of other costs, there's only a limited amount you can do, and some of that will result in prices rising in terms of the end customer. It feeds into a lot of our costs as well across the business. If we think of things like linens, that's a substantial part of the cost our linen suppliers face. And as we look at some of those challenges, what we're trying to do is, instead of just maybe working with price increases, it's trying to identify out the element that relates to energy, so that as some of that volatility hopefully dissipates and some of that price comes back, that we can react and bring back some of those costs to more sustainable type levels. Other cost inflation, obviously, we are a people business. One of our biggest costs is the people who work in our business. And there obviously are pressures on rising wage costs because of obviously the cost of living impacts, where governments are looking to pass on higher minimum wage rates. And you know, a lot of that has to do with how we run our business, how we try and innovate, reduce some of the requirement or need for labour, particularly in the market where there are labour shortages, and that requires us looking at things differently. People might not think the hotel industry is going to be at the innovation forefront, but the reality is all of us can look to find better ways of doing things in our businesses. Technology is evolving in the background in loads of different industries, and sometimes you can leverage off what's happening there to bring in change to your business, and that can help, you know, reduce the type of workload on people working in the business while not impacting what your customer is getting. And actually, sometimes we give services that our customers no longer value because our customers are changing as well. So it's really important to always be looking to the future, I suppose, to manage these things, not just to react to, say, cost, reduce cost. And it's all about cost. You need to fit it in as part of your strategy and where you're looking to go.
And certainly that aspect of labour and technology we're going to come across now later on in the session today. Maybe, Bill, if I move across to yourself. So obviously, again, if you wanted to maybe kind of summarise the kind of key challenges that you're seeing in, you know, I suppose in the wider retail and distribution sector, and again, maybe any particular strategies that you've implemented or that you're kind of you're using at the moment.
Yeah, I suppose, you know, we've been dealing with it for 2 years, where we've seen cost inflation from, you know, procuring products around the world, and indeed the freight that goes with that from around the world, and all the supply chain challenges have gone with that. So we would have seen that early, and then that's, you know, built on top of that in terms of energy costs, general inflation, foreign currency. So a lot of input costs there. And to your point, Carl, about being as efficient as you can in the business, it forces you to challenge everything. Are you doing it right? Do you need to be doing it? And then trying to recover the pricing. And in recovering pricing, that's multifaceted. It's not just increasing the price. You're looking, have we got the right packaging? Can we reduce that? Have we got the right promotional strategy? All that goes with that. And then you've got to be able to validate why you're looking for a price increase. You've got to be able to show the commodities have increased, the freight has increased, and the FX impacts and so forth. So that's reaction to all of that. And you know, if we can keep managing the business like that short term, we'll be fine. But it's very much with an eye to the future. Where do we go then? And that's very much about having the business in a sound footing. The Boyne Valley Group has been through many business cycles in its time. And that's about having a strong business, strong balance sheet, and having the cash and the access to cash. And where do you go in the future? And very much with an eye to that, M&A would be a key part of that. So we'd be planning for that and thinking about that, because you don't just turn on the tap on that. You've got to be thinking about it. That's a long runway. So we'd be in that mindset. So to your point about being glass half full, we're reacting to things. There are the business challenges. We're managing those, but would very, very much look to the future. And I think what the government did last week in terms of pumping 11 billion into the economy was a good reaction. And I think that's instilled a bit of confidence again that mightn't have been there a few weeks prior to that. So for the fourth quarter, I'd be a bit more optimistic.
Great. And again, Fiona's going to cover off, I think, some of the elements of the budget, because he said, very positive, I think, generally, in terms of what that's kind of going to do for the wider environment. David, we haven't forgotten you. We'll come over to you. Maybe, as I was looking at eShopWorld, you've obviously gone from strength to strength over the last 12 years. Can you do briefly as well, maybe just share with us your kind of company's journey to this point, and again, maybe some insights in terms of how you're managing the current economic situation?
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much. I mean, I think that the whole COVID experience obviously has impacted our business significantly as an e-commerce player. When we started with the whole COVID environment, we could see a dramatic impact on our business. Over the last 3 years, we've seen hyper growth in eShopWorld. We've probably grown 4 to 5x in that period of time. So, when COVID impacted the business, we were probably revenues of about 350, 400 million. This year, we'll probably do 1.5, 1.6 billion euros through our checkout. So it's had a dramatic impact on the business. We're obviously experiencing a post-COVID environment as well, as the world's coming out of COVID. And what does that mean for us? That means for us still significant growth rates, what we're seeing, not obviously, the doubling of the business we saw in such a relatively short space of time with the impact of the pandemic, but still really, really strong growth rates. We're very bullish on our growth forecast. And a lot of that is down to the dynamic of the industry that we're in. We're seeing changing consumer patterns. We're seeing retailers and brands as keen as ever to get an online experience, which, despite the economic headwinds we've spoken about in the last few minutes, from their own point of view, margin preservation is the cheaper route to market. So for us, it's very much in bullish kind of growth forecast. Again, we're seeing growth rates in a lot of our significant markets greater than 30%, which, in this kind of economic environment is very, very strong, albeit I think as a business, we obviously recognize the economic headwinds that everybody's experiencing, whether that's inflationary pressures, interest rate increases. That all has an impact on every business, and it probably goes back to the point that Bill made earlier on, which is for us now, it's about making sure that we get the right level of return on investment for the capital appraisals that we're looking into. So for us, it's about choosing where we can get the best bang for our buck from an investment point of view. We're coming off the back of making a fairly significant acquisition of Scalefast based in the US and in Spain, in Madrid. That's a big impact for us. It also shows the confidence we have in the market in regard to filling out that broader product spec and trying to enhance our retailers and brands in that direct-to-consumer market as well. So, we're very bullish on growth, albeit recognizing some of the headwinds that we're seeing from an economic and macro environment point of view.
David, would you have, I suppose, one maybe kind of key insight, or I suppose one key, piece of advice maybe to a CFO on the session today, in the current, I suppose, economic climate? What should they do? What would you say to them?
Look, I think for me, when we're entering this kind of phase, I've been through some, economic downturns and recessions in the past. I think the key thing is balance sheet strength, giving yourself flexibility, giving yourself options. I think that a more tailored and a more rigid impact in regard to investment appraisal and more cautious approach in some regards, albeit ensuring that it aligns with your strategy. And I think that's something that we've certainly advocated and taken on the last kind of 12 months as we react to the post-COVID world as well. So I think cash discipline and balance sheet appraisal would probably be the key thing for me.
Yeah, I think that kind of aligns to what you were both saying as well. Is there anything else, Carol, like you might add to that in terms of, say, a kind of key insight?
I think I'd say exactly the same, and I think what's really important when you have a lot of uncertainty around you, and I can't recall, but somebody's said it previously, is when plans and everything go out the window, the only thing you can hold fast is your values. So you really need to look at what you're doing and why, your strategy, your main stakeholders, your employees, your customers. You need to stay close, particularly in an environment like this, and I think we just referenced it there. You need to understand how your customers' requirements and demands are changing. You need to be guided by that. You need to understand what's impacting your employees, particularly in a people business like ours. And, you do need to have that strength on your balance sheet behind you, because it gives you that comfort to push on and push forward, because you need to look through the cycle and the uncertainty. Because if you pause totally, you'll be left behind, and that's the reality. But you do need to be mindful of the greater uncertainty that is out there.
Yeah. And Bill, then maybe for yourself.
Well, I'd reiterate about cash. And that's experience. You can read the textbook for sure. But when you've been through a cycle or two, you realise the importance of cash. And I think that'll be critical over the next few months.
Okay, so thanks, guys. I think very, very similar sentiments coming from three very different sectors and industries, but some, I think, really, really insightful points there. Thank you for that. So I'd like now to hand over to my colleague Fiona, and Fiona's going to lead out on the next session, really looking, I suppose, forward in terms of what budget 2023 brought for us.
Thank you, Brian. As Brian mentioned, my name is Fiona McLafferty, and I recently joined Deloitte as a Managing Director to lead tax controversy, having previously worked as a tax appeal commissioner and a solicitor in the Revenue Commissioners. I'm really delighted to be here today to discuss with you the key impacts of Budget 2023 and how organisations can drive profits amid the changing tax environment. It has been a really interesting conversation so far, and I'm delighted to be here with you all today. In terms of the changing tax environment, it'd be interesting to explore two aspects with you all. Firstly, the initiatives introduced in Budget 2023 and how these may impact your business. And secondly, whether the pressure on governments to balance public finances will correlate with an increase in tax controversy and tax audits. In the recent Deloitte CFO Survey, tax controversy and tax audits were identified as a priority tax consideration for CFOs in the next 12 months. So with that in mind, perhaps we'll kick off looking at the initiatives introduced to support business in Budget 2023. So the measures introduced included the Temporary Business Energy Support Scheme, the temporary reduction in the VAT rate applicable to gas and energy supplies, perhaps more relevant to your business, Carol, the 9% VAT rate to support the tourism and hospitality sectors, and then perhaps relevant to you, David, the amendments to the R&D tax credits. So with that in mind, I suppose have you formed any initial views on the initiatives and whether they will have a measurable impact on your business, or how are you implementing or looking forward in terms of the budget measures?
Well, I suppose from our perspective as a hospitality business over the last few years, we've really been helped quite a lot by the government, and we're very grateful for that support. The way some of the initiatives were designed in Ireland in particular really supported our ability to retain people in employment when we didn't necessarily have our businesses open or operating at full tilt, and that was really important. And while there were obviously challenges around trying to manage some of them, with the difficulties with the initiatives being created under such pressure and so quickly, the revenue and the government more widely reacted very quickly to tailor it so that it could work to drive, I suppose, the actions they wanted to see. So I think what we're seeing now is a continuation of some of that, where they're looking at the particular challenge of energy on a lot of businesses, and most businesses are impacted by this either directly or indirectly through their supply chains. It will absolutely help. The extent of some of the price increases we've seen, it will only help marginally to a certain extent, but at least it's a step in the right direction. It's trying to target that support and direct it to where it's needed most, rather than a scattergun approach, which maybe won't assist some people. And I think what businesses appreciate is clarity in terms of how something is set up and how you can apply it and how you can use it, and certainty. And I think, in fairness, in particular, the Irish government has been very good at doing that, setting out, the overall strategy for tax and where it's heading. And that type of certainty then allows you, to invest, to generate employment, all of those types of things. And I think that the most recent budget has been very helpful in that regard. Obviously, the VAT rate, the reduced VAT rate for hospitality has been very helpful. That is extended until February, and that they are going to monitor more actively beyond that. And that is critical because from our perspective, we're competing with businesses all across Europe, particularly if you're looking in the conference and events type space. And it is, we are probably a little bit on the higher end of some of the VAT as regards travel and hospitality, and you are trying to compete at that level. But I suppose we just appreciate the help we're getting and some of the initiatives that are coming out of that budget, and that it is targeted and measured, and that supports Ireland's wider ambitions in terms of its ongoing growth as well. And I suppose we've seen most recently where it isn't targeted or it is not necessarily consistent with long-term strategies, how that can go against you.
And in terms of your business, Bill?
Well, firstly, I think the government, in terms of investing 11 billion, I think that's impressive in this time, and I think that'll instill confidence. I think it'll build back some momentum again. From our own business point of view, I think the energy, what they've done there, that's very good. That helps. It doesn't solve everything, but it helps. And I think that's what the budget is doing. It's helping a lot of people, but it doesn't solve everything. It can't. And I suppose then from the net income for employees and so forth, there are elements of the budget that helps, whether it is the voucher scheme, doubling of that, through to credits and so forth. I think that helps. And I think that'll help with the confidence and momentum that I talked about, not only for the business, but for employees as well. So fingers crossed, that takes us in the right direction.
Absolutely. And David, in terms of any of the initiatives, particularly for an e-commerce business?
Yeah, look, I think first and foremost, the general comment I would say is that the budget itself was a supportive budget. I think it came at the right time in regard to some of the measures that were targeted, given the pressure that people are under in a general economic environment where inflation is running at the levels that's running at the moment. So I think it's very welcome from an overall macro environment that it's very positive for us. Obviously, on the e-commerce front, the probably call-outs are the extension on the KDB and Knowledge Development Box program is very important for us. And indeed, I think we have to recognise as well the impact that technology companies have had on the economy over the last 6 or 7 years. And it's very important that we maintain that rigour and structure that allow people to invest and allow that investment to impact the wider economy. So things like the extension on the KDB, probably the enhancement of the relief under SARP is another one that I'll probably call out. I think that if we can create an environment where Ireland is a hub for innovation, that will hopefully, I think, encourage more investment coming into the economy as well from outside. Maintaining the investment of FDI is a crucial piece as well for the macro environment, and I think those measures will certainly enable that as well.
Okay, thank you. I suppose then in terms of moving towards that discussion about retaining and attracting talent, which is something that has very much been at the forefront of a lot of CFO surveys recently. The budget introduced certain initiatives, as you spoke about there, David, in relation to amendments to the key employee engagement programme, the special assignee relief programme, increasing the annual limit to the small benefits exemption, rent tax credits for tenants. I mean, in terms of those initiatives at retaining and attracting talent, how far do you consider these initiatives will go towards serving that aim in your business? Perhaps, Carol, if I
think anything that supports employment is really important. Some of these initiatives wouldn't necessarily have a great impact on certain elements of our business, but anything that encourages people to remain in the workforce, people to be able to change roles, and that ends up with more money in our employees' pocket is supportive in terms of our ongoing growth.
And in terms of, I suppose, the budgetary strategy in Budget 2023 was very much about dealing with rising cost of living for individuals. But would that have an indirect impact in terms of your employees or attracting or retaining talent? Bill, I don't know whether you have anything.
Well, I'd agree with Carl that anything that the government has done in this budget is helpful. And I suppose the challenge then, it brings on to wage inflation, but that's something that we're all trying to manage as part of baking in inflation into the economy. I think in terms of retaining talent, there's a broader element to that, of which anything that puts more money in their pocket helps any employee. I'd come at it from that perspective.
And David, is there anything from your perspective in terms of the mobility of labour, particularly post-COVID?
Yes, absolutely. The tech environment we've experienced in the last number of years, there has been a rush for talent, and it's a constant challenge in the business that we're in. So any measures that can be used to help and support that, obviously are very beneficial, considering what we're seeing on the wage inflation front. So I think generally positive in regard to some of those measures, and certainly welcome from the point of view of, as people have said, putting enhanced monies in people's back pocket is something that's absolutely important for everybody at this point in time.
And are there any alternative non-cash alternatives that you consider the government could introduce in terms of the tax system?
I think a key part for us, and I think for the wider tech environment, obviously, is share options and share option schemes, and the compliance and administration, which are quite complex at the moment. The share option plans generally touch 2 or 3 different types of taxes, and as I say, from an employee point of view, can be quite onerous in regard to maintenance. So I think, given the current environment, I think some support in regard to that would definitely be helpful from an employee point of view. From a wider business point of view, I think more clarity perhaps and greater relief under the general R&D and KDB programs, I think would certainly welcome, and I say from the point you made earlier on, would certainly encourage increased investment, which is what the economy certainly needs from some of the tech sector and the FDI investment as well. So they're the kind of areas that I'd probably tailor and identify.
Thanks, David. I suppose the other area that I wanted to cover with you was, I suppose, with the pressure on governments to balance public finances, whether you consider that will correlate to an increase in tax controversy and tax audits. It was announced as a budget measure that the Revenue Commissioners will conduct a range of targeted projects which will include PEY compliance interventions involving a focus on share schemes, with the expectation that this will yield increased exchequer receipts arising from taxpayer compliance. So with that in mind, do you consider that the Revenue Commissioners will focus on particular sectors or particular taxes? And could this have an impact on your business, particularly in the context of your striving to drive profits in the business? I suppose to you, Bill.
Yeah, I suppose over the years we've had a number of revenue letters appearing. And I suppose from my perspective, it's about being proactive on that one. And over the years we would have done health checks and planning for improvements. And learning from any revenue audits we've had along the way. So I would expect that's normal business practice now for any business, and indeed for the revenue to be reaching out and seeking information. So I would encourage anyone to be proactive around that and plan for it. And having your controls and procedures in place and looking at it from a risk perspective, because it will happen. If it hasn't happened to your business, it will happen at some stage, under whichever heading it might be, and then it can broaden out very much. And in my experience, what I would suggest to people in being proactive about that is to reach out as quickly as possible to your advisor. Not only about actually managing it, but the communication channels that are essential in dealing with the revenue, making sure that you're saying the right things at the right time, etc. Because managing that relationship is critical, because it can get very difficult if you don't manage it properly. That'd be my advice.
And I mean, a relationship with the Revenue Commissioners is a relationship like any, so it requires some work and some effort. And in terms of you, Carol, is there anything?
Yeah, I think it'd be the same as I mentioned earlier on. We take a stakeholder approach inside in Dalata, and so we look at all our stakeholders that impact on our business, and the Revenue Commissioners here in Ireland would obviously be just another stakeholder. It is increasingly complex from a tax perspective in terms of the types of legislation coming out and some of the technology investments there, and you really do have to invest as a large business in moving your own abilities on in the whole tax area. I would fully expect they will be looking to increase, some of their interventions, etc., because they need to, like everybody else, they need to get in as much funds as they can. And the legislation has been moving so extensively, and their own investment into their technology platforms and their ability to access data and interrogate data and building up their own teams. I would fully expect they're going to have to look for some return on that investment and collect, I suppose, taxes they are fairly owed.
And are you, in your business, adopting any strategies in relation to managing that as a risk function?
We have a lot of resource in our tax team, and we believe in keeping a lot of that knowledge in house, so that everything we're doing, we have a tax aspect considered around it, and then bringing in obviously that expertise and advice from our advisors as we go through when we go into either new or more complex areas, because we just need to be sure as a large listed business that we have everything ticked that should be ticked.
And David, in your experience of the revenue commissioners and...
Yeah, look, what I would say is that, with the global tax landscape is changing, and it's changing fast, and Ireland is a part of that. We know that we have an adherence now more and more to common EU rules or OECD rules. So we're seeing in our business, we operate in over 200 markets on behalf of our clients, and we can see taxation authorities are getting to data faster, and more proactive in regard to investigations or queries. And I think you've got to, as part of BAU, stay ahead of that. So from our point of view, that's a normal compliance procedure. We obviously have invested significantly in our tax team, some fairly specialised knowledge in regard to that. But also, as well, as I think the point is that that the court of public opinion is very much focused on tax compliance and people paying their taxes on time. And we're like any other business that we have to ensure that's just BAU from our point of view.
Right. Thank you. Thank you all very much for a really insightful and interesting discussion. I will now hand you back to Brian, who will close out our session and our Q&A. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. So the next session we're going to move on to discuss the technology and talent. So just some key statistics firstly from the CFO survey. Firstly, it was seen as a significant opportunity in terms of technology and investment in technology, despite, I suppose, everything that we've talked about in the kind of business sentiment section. 25% of CFOs are currently using AI and machine learning. 72% of Irish finance leaders believe that data prep, or indeed data wrangling, is one of the key skills going forward for kind of, I suppose, new recruits. So I suppose at the backdrop of all that, Dave, I might come to you first. Technology has clearly played a pivotal role in eShopWorld's success to date. For CFOs considering investing in technology, can you provide them with some advice?
Yeah, sure. So, we've experienced obviously a fairly significant transformation automation program in eShopWorld. If I specifically talk about finance, we obviously saw the huge upsurge in volumes of work and business that happened to us in a very short space of time, and how the finance team reacted to that and cope with that. We wouldn't have been able to enable ourselves to do that without the benefit of automation, and grabbing onto that pretty quickly is part of the process. So, we've been on a pretty long journey of transformation automation and using BI or analytical tools, robotics to help us on that journey. So, we obviously have made mistakes in the past in regard to encompassing that and taking the benefits of it. So, some of the key learnings for us is most definitely to identifying and separating out those key resources and move them away from BAU, I'd say is the first and foremost thing. You'll see a fairly significant return on investment in the short term when you take the low-hanging fruit out of the equation. I think that getting momentum in projects at the start is really key. It gets people's buy-in. And I think the other part of the employee piece as well is you're opening up a huge element of value add for the employee in regard to the kind of flexibility and variability of work that they're going to do. It gets them out of the mundane tasks that nobody really wants to do. And then lastly, clearly from a controls and an enhancement point of view and a process point of view, it takes out the human interaction that we were seeing very much and trying to cope with the avalanche of work that came upon us at the onset of COVID. So all in, it's been a hugely significant impact on the finance function, specifically in eShopWorld. But now it's obviously broadening out to the wider business area and across various different functions as we continue to grow and continue to embrace the technology and the benefits that there are.
I think that very much linking in then to that kind of talent retention aspect, which I think we're going to kind of touch on in a few moments. Bill, I know in Boyne Valley also, technology improvements and innovations, it's something that's always on the agenda. So again, maybe kind of how do you manage that kind of on a day-to-day?
Well, I suppose firstly you go back and start with the basics of getting the right data set up so that you can get at the information, get at the insights. And I think it's about getting people to understand that end-to-end part of the business. When we're bringing people in and then holding on to them, as you're developing their commercial awareness of understanding the broader business rather than just one specific area, that becomes very attractive because it's engaging, stretches people. And I think there are more projects appear out of that. As whether you're integrating something, whatever it might be, an acquisition, you then have that core knowledge of the business, or indeed it might be a revenue audit. They have that knowledge of the business, and that's critical. And for me, that's an attraction. And people working with me have been in the business for a long time. They grow, the business grows, and if they're being stretched on an ongoing basis in a positive, constructive way, and they can see growth in what they're doing, they can see growth in the business and their role in the business, and it's back to David's point, and it's value add, well, then you're into a very virtuous place. Yeah. Then they bring other people with them, and people look to them for support, and then they're able to bring other people in with them as well. Yeah. And you get into that kind of a very positive culture as well. Yeah. And then you get to a much better run business, much better insights, you're getting people working cross-functionally across the business, and then people are seeing the value that they're adding, and people are coming to them, working with them. So for me, that's a very quick synopsis. But if you can sell that into people on the way in the door, and then they see it happening, then they surprise themselves with how long they're there and how much they're learning along the way.
Okay. Great. No, thanks, Bill. And I think that ties nicely into the next section we're just going to talk about, which is talent. And again, just from the survey, 89% of the CFOs surveyed believe that talent development was an important skill for the future of finance teams, and also 76% of the CFOs believed that there was a shortage of skilled labour in the Irish market. So specifically, I suppose, focusing on the Irish market. So I suppose with all those stats, Carol, I might come to you first. Obviously, the hospitality sector, it's very labour intensive. How are you managing kind of the retention in your industry at the moment?
Yes, we have, I suppose, in the hospitality industry, you will have people who come to you for a career, to build a career in hospitality, and then you have people who'll come for shorter times, maybe when they're in college, when they move to a new country, to have a job and a role, and you need to cater for all of those people. And I suppose just to come back quickly to the technology point in terms of how that impacts, if I just look even at the finance team and the wider business, you do need to find better ways of doing things to remove some of what people are doing that they don't enjoy doing. It's to David's point, the sort of mundane tasks that they see don't add value and that they don't enjoy doing. And that's where technology can really allow you to do that. And investing into that whole space. And also another point David made was that you have to resource that. Yeah. You cannot assume you can take a couple of hours out of somebody's time in the finance team and imagine they're going to lead out a transformation project. We've done a huge amount of work over the last few years to accelerate our investment in technology in the business for the wider business, but it also supports us in finance in terms of removing some of those tasks off the list so that you can actually focus on business partnering. And the reality is we all are now operating in a far more agile an environment that requires you to be far more agile. Things move much more quickly. So you need to get the insights, you need to get the right insights, and you need to be able to turn quite quickly. And if your head is buried in just trying to get the numbers out the door at the end of the month, you're really not focused on the right things. But I suppose if we look at talent more broadly across the business and within finance, you have to look at your people almost like your customers. You need to understand what attracts them to your business in the first place, what they want, and you need to make sure you're tailoring your offering to that. So that may be flexibility. It may be just treated fairly and decently at work. Some people, it is all about the learning and development opportunities that they have, the growth opportunities they have for their own career, and enabling them to achieve what they want to do out of their careers. And people will move now more quickly between functions and between disciplines, and you have to look at the person who's opposite you, see what they can offer you in the business and see what you can offer them. And it really is about coming back to some of those basics and understanding that those people are assets to your business, no matter what their role is within the business, and particularly when you're in business like ours, where they are engaging with your customers all the time. If you have unhappy people in the business, it's going to be very difficult to have happy customers.
Yeah, no, very good point, Carl. Yeah, Bill, from a Boyne Valley perspective, is there any particular strategies that you've implemented from a talent retention perspective?
Well, look, I think it's back to Carl's point about developing people, and people are at the forefront. Our people are dealing with our customers. They're representing the company, dealing with suppliers and all the rest. And then that's back to the values of the business, the culture of the business. And I think on the way in, it's attracting that. Actually, when people are walking around, are they seeing happy, smiley people, engaged in what they're doing? But that when they come in, they're going, actually, this is what I was hoping to get to.
Yeah.
And I think then you can retain people. Yeah. And I think then you've got to be doing that interesting work. And your point about, whether it is the automation or doing away with the mundane stuff, that's important that they feel they've made that difference.
Yeah.
Whatever that might be, that they've come in and they can actually make a difference.
Yeah.
And then they see the benefits of that. One other thing I would say is that, people talk about systems, people and processes. If you get the right people, sort out your processes, come back to your systems, lo and behold, you get into a much better business. It's much more controlled, you got your procedures in place, and you get your efficiencies, and then you get your insights, and then you run a better business.
Yeah. David, from your perspective, anything in the eShopWorld, I suppose, that you could share with us?
Look, I think that all the points that Bill and Carol have made are all relevant to both eShopWorld and every business that we've experienced in the last couple of years. It is about values. It is about culture. It is about staying close to your people. It's about basic management of understanding what your people's needs are. I mean, for us, the output of all that was that, the surge in the business and the growth we've experienced in the last 2 or 3 years is testament to the team who have done that pretty much remotely. And I think we forget about that, the experience of COVID, that working from home and working that remote environment has been challenging for everybody. But the output of that for us is the success we've had is pretty much down to the team solely in regard to coming together, taking the challenges head on and doing what's right for the business. And, we're absolutely indebted to the team that we have in eShopWorld, which, has delivered what we've delivered in the last number of years. So I do think that it does come down to culture, basic management, and staying close to your people and listening to them as well.
No, thanks, David. Thanks, guys. We'll wrap up that session, and we're going to move on now to the Q&As. So thanks, everyone, for your questions. So I'm just going to run through some of those now with our panelists. And the first question actually is kind of picking up on the point around talent. So there's been a lot of discussion recently about the shortage of skilled labour available in the Irish market. It obviously came up in the survey also. Is there something the panellists are seeing in their organisations? And if so, what are they doing or what do they plan to do to help overcome this issue? Maybe I'll start with you, Bill.
Well, what I've done over the years, you may not always get the person you want, but you might go for somebody who is less experienced but has the potential. And then you're looking to realise that potential, and then it becomes a learning area, and on that basis a person comes in and you like to see them flourish. And then lo and behold, that's a rising tide for people around the finance team in particular, or indeed the broader business. I think it's how is the business performed, where's the business going? People want to be part of something, and in a sense how you sell it to them. Whether they're coming in the doors now or they're staying with the business, you're trying to hold on to them, people want to be part of something. And it's about giving them that understanding and context of the business and their role in it, and how that role can flourish even more in the future. And you're giving them developmental opportunities, whether that's an acquisition or an integration, whatever, a new project, new IT, whatever it might be. I think that's what people want to grow. And then some people just want to stay as they are. And you to Carl's point earlier, what does each person want, and you try and work within that. So. It's an evolving picture, I would say.
Yeah. Carol, anything from your perspective?
I suppose what I'd say, what we do inside in Dalata is people really has to be the heart of everything you do, and that has to be your starting point. And the reality is, we have fantastic properties, beautiful hotels, but honestly, if you don't have the people in there to bring them alive, and you see that through COVID when you couldn't open the business necessarily, they're worth nothing. So you really have to look at how you attract people into the business, the promise you give them, what they're looking from you as an employer. Is it, a good job, being treated fairly, flexibility around their lives? Is it learning and development? Is it the opportunity to grow, to evolve their career over, many years? You need to understand what you're promising them, and then you need to make sure you absolutely deliver. From our perspective, where we have people who are, closer to minimum wage or entry-level wages in Ireland, it's a difficult environment for people at the moment, and particularly if we look at housing, that is a real challenge. And I know the government is obviously very focused on that, but that is something as a country we really need to resolve, and not just for people on those entry-level wages, but all the way up. We will struggle to attract talent into this country if they do not have homes to live in, schools to send their children to. So I think that's really important as we look more widely as an economy in terms of what we're doing. We do need to prioritise resolving some of that, because it is a growing issue.
Yeah, and certainly something we're hearing actually across the board in terms of that kind of housing having an impact in attracting talent into the country. David, anything from your perspective?
Look, I think I'd echo absolutely what Carol has said. I mean, I think people are central to us. It's a key component, if not the most important component of the business. There's probably two aspects that I'd probably call out that we've found quite successful in the last number of years. Has been, one is keeping communication flow open to our people, getting them to buy into the business, making them understand exactly what's happening in the market. It's quite a fast-paced, dynamic environment that we operate in. So I think people benefit from understanding what the wider play is and how eShopWorld is trying to navigate through that journey. And I think then following on from that is you want people to take ownership and responsibility. And one of the things that we've done, particularly in the finance area, is to empower people, give people responsibility, give them ownership of issues. And they've absolutely responded to that in regard to overcoming some of the challenges that we faced in the last number of years. So I think the depth of the team absolutely is there, and they've responded to those kind of challenges that we face. So I think it's about communication and clear leadership, but also giving them responsibility and empowerment will drive it for them, but also for the business as well.
I'd also add that sometimes, circumstances people want to leave, whether they're getting married, moving house, moving to a different location, moving abroad, whatever it might be. But I think it's about leaving the door open and finishing on good terms that somebody can come back. So I think there's many different facets to it. You also want them to be an ambassador for the business when they're leaving, talking about your business. So they're talking to other friends and colleagues, whatever, who are also saying, well, actually, it's a good place to work. So everybody can help the business in that sense.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. Yeah,
I think actually one of the challenges in a post-COVID environment, as some people are still getting, to grips with the new sort of normal, is how you get teams working together. And it's to David's point on communication. If you're physically not in the same office, how do you continue to maintain the spirits that were there before? That engagement between people bouncing ideas off each other. And I think in some ways people have forgotten some of that social aspect and what it brings to your own development and also to your enjoyment of work. And I think that's a challenge for a lot of businesses, particularly those who haven't yet quite got people back into the offices in any way. But at the same time, maintaining some of the flexibility that we've seen through COVID and how that does help people with their own lives.
I do think there's another aspect that has come out of COVID with people working from home and some people being at home when they're home and all that, is that the whole mental awareness that people ask, well, how are you? And they genuinely mean it and will give you time to listen and talk through whatever might be. So I think people are taking a different perspective now that a couple of years ago may not have asked a question, may not have been interested in the answer, but are now. And I think people value that. And that goes back to if you're people-centric and that's the culture, people say, actually, this is a good place to be. I want to be part of something like that as part of the family or whatever way you want to describe it.
Yeah. I think it's a question actually we're often asked as we kind of talk to clients is hybrid and working hybrid. Like, what does that mean to us and what are we seeing other businesses do? I suppose, how are you managing that? As you said earlier, Carol, it's flexibility on one hand, but also the social element of kind of working together in a team. So how are you kind of managing that from an organisation perspective?
I think it's communication and clarity, and I think that's two-way. I think where the challenge has been for some businesses is not quite setting out what the expectations are in the new environment, and trying to maybe encourage people back and then trying to take it from there. Whereas I think sometimes you need to get people back into the business, and then you sort of try and figure out how it now works in the new environment, because it's got loads of challenges, but it's got loads of benefits. So you need to use both. I'm just back from, we had our finance conference about about a week ago, we had 60 people together, and the energy in the room and the enthusiasm as we, head into even budgeting for 2023, which obviously will bring plenty of challenges. But getting people together, having them reconnect, have them talk about their experiences over the last couple of years, because they don't necessarily see each other otherwise, it's hugely beneficial. And I think it is easy for us to forget that and sort of say, well, we're all getting the job done, we're moving through the task lists, we're getting those things ticked off. But really, you're not getting some of the impact of that collaboration, and it's not sometimes as tangible, and you don't know until you look back what's been missing. So it's very much trying to prioritise getting people together, as well as just having really good people in your business. That's where the magic happens, is when people are working together.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah,
hybrid is about trying to get the balance right. I think you need people in the office. That's social. Look, we're social beings. That social interaction is critical. That photocopier moment, water cooler moment, whatever you want to call it, where you, I should mention that to you, and things get resolved unknowns to yourself. It just also brings a bit of the fun element. And if you are on a Teams call, it's trying to start it off a bit light. How are you getting on, or whatever, as opposed to just going next call.
Yeah.
So I think there's things people just need to be more aware of across the board. But I do think you need to be in the office. One of the other things is that if you're established in the business for a period of time, you know people. And that's fine. You've got a history, if you like. But for new people who've joined the business, in our business the last couple of years, my goodness me, that's got to be difficult if you're working out of a room on your own and so forth. So I think it's about trying to engage those people back in and go, oh, that's who you are, and just bring that social bit back into it. And, people do exist. So that's what we're encouraging.
Okay. David, what are you doing from a hybrid working perspective?
Yeah, look, I think that's we're fully remote now. We're back into a hybrid mode as well. I think that does present benefits and challenges on both sides. Probably the nuance that I've seen certainly is that getting people back in the office, absolutely, teamwork and collaboration definitely flows an awful lot easier. You get connection with the business in a much more easier environment. But where I've seen that the benefit really of getting back into the office is that cross-functional benefit, where you're working across not just a finance team, but working across different functions in the organization. And I think that we've certainly seen the benefit of that as we brought people back in and offered that hybrid solution. So I do think it's key and crucial that it is a balance both for the employee, but also for the business as well. And I think I can see where we've lost some of that collaboration across different functions, where it's been fully remote, and now we're going back into a hybrid mode. We're certainly see the benefits of that from that kind of cross-functional, which are more kind of onerous tasks and much more difficult challenges to overcome. We're seeing the benefits of that from that point of view.
Yeah, sure.
But also from a development point of view and a learning point of view, David, to that, if somebody's remote at home, it's very hard to explain to somebody, look here, and this is what it is. All of a sudden, you're in the office, and it's that collaboration, it just gets resolved.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah. Okay, no, thanks for that. I think we'll move on just maybe to another question, this focusing on technology. So the question is around, how are you keeping on top of the rapid changes in technology, and to make sure that you have the right skills for the future? David, I might start with you, actually, if that's okay.
Yeah, I suppose that there's two aspects for us for that is the automation piece, which I spoke about earlier on, in regard to there's a wider transformation piece happening in eShop in regard to using technologies and the benefits of those. But also then is in the center of the business, obviously product and tech are a BAU, and that's what we do. So, our technology investment is a considerable investment each year. It's a forward-looking investment. So, the projects that our teams are working on now currently, we may not see the benefits of those for 12 or 18 months. It's a dynamic environment. So we're taking feedback from the market, from our clients, from retailers, from our brands. We're seeing exactly where trends are going. And it goes back to the point that I mentioned at the very start of the conversation in regard to investment appraisal and where you get the right level of return for that. So it's quite a complex environment for us in regard to investment appraisal and measuring output and measuring efficiency and return. So it's very much central to the business model, and it's led to obviously the success we've had over the last number of years of staying close to the client, but also staying close to the market and looking exactly where those enhancements are going to produce the right level of returns for us and for our clients' needs over the next number of years. So it's a very much a forward-looking view for us in eShopWorld.
Yeah, okay. Maybe Bill, the same question to you, in terms of keeping on top of the rapid change in technology.
It's challenging because it is, the IT is moving at such a pace across the business, and if you look at the broader sense of IT encompasses many different aspects. You start with cyber is one aspect, which is at the pace there is phenomenal daily. But you go through to day-to-day economies of scale. How can you improve things, whether it is financial reporting, automating there, invoice processing, whatever it might be. We would be looking to do that on an ongoing basis. And I think then it's about, from a business point of view, about prioritising which ones are we going after. And that's an ongoing view, not just from a financial perspective or return perspective, but actually what needs to get done in the business because of business issues.
Yeah, okay. Carol, from your perspective, anything that you're seeing?
In terms of technology, or in terms, I suppose, of our service in lots of ways, it hasn't changed. We offer sleep, but basically in time to people who are coming into our hotels. But actually, there's been a huge amount of change in terms of how our customers come to us from a distribution channel perspective, and the arrival of online travel agents and all those types of things has really disrupted, I suppose, how business comes to us. And we very much have to understand, because they evolve very quickly. They're constantly pushing on their own technologies, and we need to understand that, and we need to move as well how we engage with our customers. COVID has also had a big impact in terms of what customers expect, how business interact with them, things like QR codes, be they in your restaurants, online check-ins, all those types of things. And there's lots going on in that space. Okay. So it is very much like we embrace technology, we get really excited about it. We see it as part of how we, improve our service to our customers. Yeah, sure. And people are looking for that. People, using your phone, even for things like possibly getting into your bedroom going forward, they're all things that the industry and we are exploring. Because that's what people expect nowadays. Sure. That's how we all operate. Yeah. And you have to bring that in.
Yeah, okay. No, very good. Just maybe one or two other questions if we have time. A question here to the panelists. David, maybe I might come to you on this. Are there examples of decisions or developed projects that you've taken and you've ongoing in terms of reducing OPEX permanently rather than the short term?
Yeah, I would say that our use of some of the cutting edge technologies, particularly on the finance side, on the robotics side, most definitely is a permanent shift where we're seeing OPEX being just taken out of the business full time. The use of bots, for example, gives the availability to operate in a 24/7 capacity when we've left the office. So the robot is working away doing the tasks that somebody would have to do on a 9-to-5 basis. So if you look at it in that kind of context, on the automation journey that we've had, the low hanging fruit that I referenced earlier on, and the return on investment we saw on some of those initial projects were in the high 80%. For a long period of time. So that journey has certainly impacted in regard to cost avoidance and also then taking out some of that OPEX. It's about then bringing it across the other functions in the business to ensure that we get the full business benefit from an end-to-end point of view. So I'd probably reference that as being an area that the investment has certainly warranted seeing the reduction in costs.
Yeah, okay. Carol, a question maybe for yourself, and I suppose around long-term investment CapEx, and the potential, the impact of, say, the likes of sustainability on that. You could kind of just talk to us about that.
Yes, I suppose we build buildings and add extensions and renovate. We'd spend quite a lot of CapEx in our business, as you would expect, with the level of infrastructure we have. And sustainability really has to be the heart of everything you do now. And every decision, it's no longer about looking at some of the returns financially that you can make from that or how that meets a customer need. Now you're looking through the lens of sustainability. And that placed a lot of burden on the business in terms of us understanding what's out there. And I think we're all in this type of space where we're learning, but there is, there is no other ability, I suppose, other than to do this for us as people. And as a business, our customers are looking more to understanding what we're doing. Our employees are looking more to understanding what we're doing. Our investors, our other funders. So it is imperative that we are able to, articulate what we're doing, and we can communicate both our strategy and any investment we're making through that lens as well, and understand and explain and understand how we're spending our money in a sustainable way, because it's simply not acceptable anymore to say, well, I don't really understand that, and you know, I just want to build a building and let people into it. You really do need to make that at the heart of your decision, and that's what we're doing. We allocate specific spend out of our capital budget to what we would term green projects, but it's getting far broader than that now. So everything we look at now, we question the sustainability on it. And it's trying, sometimes there are some suppliers who are very far ahead in that journey, and there are others who are really only coming to it now. But I think for businesses everywhere, it is something we're all going to need to understand far better over the coming years.
Okay, well, thanks, Carol. Finally, maybe one question to you, Bill. If there was one investment that you would prioritise over the next 12 months, what would it be?
I suppose we're trying to cope with this year first. From my point of view as a business, it's about prioritising what is it we're going after next year and the outer years, not just look at the 12 months ahead. And we're only just grabbing our heads around that at the moment as to which one are we going to pick. Return on investment will be a key part of that. And then there's several other facets that go with that. And then we'll go to the board and make our recommendations accordingly on what investments we need to make on it. Just to touch on the sustainability, that's a massive area coming, not just from investor relations and everything, but we see in our business where we've got clean plastic sacks on one hand. Where's the future of that? And over here we've got green aware compostable bags. So you can see where that's changing, and our customers as well are asking us, well, tell me about your packaging. Can you stand over that and justify it and trace it back and so forth? So there's a key element in that as well. But in terms of where we're going as a business, where we're going to invest next year, that's going to be very important for the business, because it'll be driven with where's the balance sheet, where's the cash flow out of that, as we talked about earlier as well.
So thank you to our panellists, Carol Phelan, CFO of Dalata Group, to Bill O'Sullivan, CFO of Boyne Valley, for joining us virtually. Thanks, David Manifold, CFO of eShopWorld. The questions that we haven't had a chance to answer today, we will respond to you over the coming days. The recording will be circulated also in the coming days, and please use #DeloitteCFO to share thoughts on the webinar. Thank you.